The sphere was the size of a basketball and weighed nothing at all. That was the first thing Dr. Mara Voss noticed when she lifted it from the excavation tray in sublevel 4 of the Krasnoyarsk facility, the absence of weight, as if the object had no intention of being held. She set it back down. She left it alone for 3 days. On the 4th morning she put on nitrile gloves and lifted it again, and it was still nothing, still hollow feeling, still wrong in the way that beautiful things are sometimes wrong. Her supervisor told her it was alien in origin. She told him she already knew. That was 4 years ago. Now the sphere sat in the cargo hold of the Meridian at a constant 2.1 Kelvin, sealed behind 6 inches of borosilicate glass, and Mara sat in the observation bay watching it the way you watch a dog that has never once barked. Earth had 40 years, maybe 60 if the crop models were optimistic, and they never were. The Fen-12 pathogen had consumed 70% of the planet's arable topsoil in 9 years. It didn't kill people directly. It just quietly ate the ground under everything they grew. By 2040, there were food riots in 6 continents. By 2047, there was something else, something quieter and worse, the gradual understanding, spreading through governments and research institutions, and eventually through ordinary people waiting in ration lines, that the math simply didn't work anymore. There was no combination of vertical farms and synthetic protein and managed population that kept the numbers from eventually bottoming out. Someone had to go find another planet. The sphere designated Artifact 1 in official documents, called the Seed by Mara and everyone who worked with it long enough, was believed to be a terraforming device. Its internal structure, imaged through 7 generations of scanning technology, resembled the molecular machinery of a bacterial spore scaled to astronomical complexity. Feed it the right signal on the right planet and in theory it did what a spore does. It grew. What it grew, exactly, no one was certain. But the atmospheric models for a Class M candidate planet at 23 light-years suggested that what it grew might be breathable. Mara had spent 4 years arguing that they didn't understand it well enough. She was overruled and sent along anyway, which was the kind of decision that only made sense if you understood how desperate things had gotten. The Meridian carried 11 people, herself, Commander David Oren, ex-military and functionally incapable of doubt, Amy Vasquez, systems engineer and the only person aboard who laughed at her own jokes, and 8 others whose names Mara had learned but whose faces she kept confusing in the recycled light of the ship's corridors. They had traveled through the Havorson wormhole junction on day 41 and emerged somewhere else. Not 23 light-years from Earth, somewhere else. Oren ran the navigation diagnostics 4 times. The results were identical each time. The Meridian had arrived at a planet that wasn't on any chart, orbiting a K-type star that wasn't in any catalog, at a distance from Earth that the instruments couldn't confidently calculate, because something about local spacetime was slightly, persistently wrong, the way a mirror is slightly wrong when the silver backing has begun to peel. The planet below was green. Not metaphorically, not suggestively, visually, emphatically, extraordinarily green. Cloud cover parted as they descended to survey altitude, and Mara pressed her face to the viewport like a child and felt something pull loose in her chest. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, liquid water in the visible river deltas, vegetation signatures across 40% of the landmass, a mean surface temperature of 16 degrees Celsius. "It's already terraformed," she said. Oren looked at the same data, or it was always like this. "No," she pointed to the spectral composition readout. "Chlorophyll absorption at 680 and 700 nanometers. That's not alien photosynthesis. That's our photosynthesis. Those are Earth plants." There was a very long silence. "Then we plant the seed here," Oren said. "This is close enough to the target conditions. We run the deployment protocol, we document everything, we send the data package back through the wormhole relay, and we go home." Mara didn't argue. She was still looking at the green. They landed in a meadow. That was the only word for it. A meadow, improbably ordinary grass and low flowering plants bending in a wind that smelled, through the filtered air of her suit, of something she couldn't name but recognized the shape of. Like the smell of rain before it arrives. Like the edge of something about to happen. The sphere went into the designated depression in the hillside. Mara ran the activation sequence. The sphere pulsed once, a single wave of blue-white light that passed through her suit and her body and the hillside and kept going, and then it sat there in the ground looking like a basketball again, and she walked back to the ship. That was when the sound started. At first she thought it was atmospheric, wind moving through terrain features in an unfamiliar way, or some geological process. Then Chen, the geologist, said the sounds were coming from inside the hull. Then Reyes, the medic, said he couldn't find Chen. They found Chen 4 hours later. He was in the cargo hold, seated with his back against the wall, eyes open, breathing slowly. He looked at Mara when she crouched in front of him and said, in a voice that didn't have his usual cadence in it, "It was waiting. It's been waiting for something like you." "Chen," she said, "what was waiting?" He didn't answer. His breathing slowed further. Reyes ran the med scan, every cellular indicator nominal. Heart rate 42, nothing wrong, nothing explainable. They moved him to the medical bay. They locked the cargo hold. Oren called a command meeting in the bridge with the 4 people he trusted most, and Mara was apparently one of them, and he stood at the head of the table with his arms crossed and said, "What are we dealing with?" It wasn't a question. It was an invitation to guess out loud. "The sphere," Mara said. "The sphere is inert." "The sphere activated," she said. "We don't know what the activation radius is. We don't know if the process it started is atmospheric or biological or something else entirely. We know it pulsed. We know Chen touched it during deployment. We know he's now," she paused, "somewhere else, in his own head." "You're saying the sphere infected him." "I'm saying I don't know what the sphere did. I'm saying we should treat the uncertainty seriously, and I've been saying that for 4 years. Oren uncrossed his arms. He looked at the floor, then at her. "What do? We figure out what's in this planet," she said, "before it figures out more about us." What was in the planet? As best Mara could determine over the next 18 hours, was something that had been there for a very long time. The surface scans she ran from the ship's sensor array returned a secondary reading she'd initially dismissed as geological noise, a distributed network of signal nodes running along the root systems of the vegetation. Not just along the roots, through them. Encoded in the bioelectrical activity of the plant life like words written in a language you'd have to be very close to the ground to hear. The planet wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a random Class M world they'd stumbled onto through a navigation error. Something had arranged it. Something had grown Earth plants in Earth soil under Earth spectrum light, and then sat back and waited, with the particular patience of something that has no concept of hurry, for something like them to show up holding a sphere that pulsed blue-white when activated. She thought about the sphere's weight, or rather its absence, and felt cold. "It knows we're here," she told Amy, who was the only person she could say it to without triggering a procedural response. They were in the engineering bay, both pretending to run routine diagnostics, which was how they had most of their actual conversations. "It knew we were coming," Amy said. "That might be the same thing." "The sphere," Amy said. She set down the diagnostic tablet. "Mara, how long have humans had the sphere?" 9 years since discovery. 4 years since we cracked the internal structure." "And before that?" Mara was quiet. "Because I'm looking at the root network data," Amy said, "and the distribution pattern isn't random. It radiates from a central point. A point that the topographic mapping puts roughly," she pulled up the overlay. "There." The center of the signal network was the hillside, the depression where they'd planted the sphere. "It was already here," Mara said. The network before we deployed the sphere. Yes. It built the depression. It prepared the exact location. Yes. So when we activated the sphere, we weren't starting a process. She could hear her own voice going very flat, the way it did when she was working through something she didn't want to be true. We were completing one. Amy nodded slowly. Mara thought about the smell of rain before it arrives. She went back to the med bay. Chen was awake, sitting up, drinking water from a bulb with both hands the way you do when you've been very far away and you're relearning the ordinary weight of things. He looked up when she came in. "You figured it out," he said. "Some of it." "It showed me," he said. "When I touched it, the sphere. It showed me not in images, it wasn't images, it was more like." He stopped. "You know the feeling when a word is on the tip of your tongue? It was like that, but the word was everything. A complete picture that I couldn't quite resolve. I got the shape of it." "What's the shape?" He looked at the wall behind her, through the wall, through the ship, through the planet's crust. "It's a test," he said. "It's been running a test for a very long time. It put the sphere somewhere accessible and waited to see what kind of species would find it, understand it partially, bring it here, to see what we'd do with what we didn't understand." He brought his eyes back to her. "It wanted to know if we'd carry a thing we couldn't explain across the dark and put it in the ground anyway, out of hope." "That's a hell of a test," Mara said. "It's run it before." She sat down. "And the other species that found the sphere before us?" "There weren't any," Chen said. "We're the first." She thought about that. She thought about the meadow below the ship, the impossible earth green of it, the smell of rain. "Why does the planet look like this?" she asked. "Because it's showing us what we're trying to save," he said quietly. "It grew us an image of what we came here to find." She walked out of the med bay and went straight to Oren's quarters and knocked and went in without waiting, because they didn't have time for the pause between the knock and the answer. "We're being evaluated," she said. He looked up from the mission log he'd been annotating. "By what?" "I don't know what to call it. Old. Distributed. It lives in the planetary root system and possibly in the planet's magnetic field, and it's been here longer than our sun has been burning. It put the sphere somewhere humans would find it and waited to see what we'd do." Oren set down his stylus. He was the kind of man who processed information by going very still, and he went very still now. Purpose. Unknown, but Chen's impression was, she chose the word carefully, benign, like something deciding whether to open a door. "And are we passing?" "That," she said, "is what I came to ask you." Oren was silent for a long moment. He picked up his stylus. He set it back down. He said, "We came here to do a job." "We did." "The sphere has been activated. Whatever process it started is in motion. We can't unring that bell." "No." "So we do what we came to do." He stood. He looked out the small viewport at the green of the planet below. "We document everything. We communicate everything back through the relay, and we don't run. It might not let us run." "That's not why." He turned from the viewport. His face had the look of a man who has made peace with something large. "We came here to find humanity a home. If something old enough to grow a planet wants to know if we're serious about that." He reached past her and opened the door. "Then we should be serious about it." The signal came at 3:40 ship time, which was when most of the crew was in minimal state sleep. Mara was not asleep. She was sitting in the observation bay with the lights off and a cold cup of coffee, watching the bioluminescent pulses move through the root network visible in the valley below, slow, rhythmic, like breathing, like a heartbeat. When the **Meridian **SCOM system lit up with an incoming signal on a frequency that wasn't in any human communication protocol. She put on the headset. What came through was not sound exactly. It was pattern, structured the way music is structured, or the way a sentence is structured, meaning carried not in individual elements but in their sequence and spacing and the silences between them. She listened to it for 40 minutes, recording everything, before she understood that it wasn't a message. It was a question. She spent 3 hours thinking about how to answer it. The question, as she worked it out in the early morning silence, was this: what will you do with it? Not what can you do, not what have you done, what will you do? Future tense. The thing below wasn't asking about her species' history, which it presumably already knew, or their capabilities, which the sphere had been designed to measure. It was asking about intention, about the direction they were pointed. At 6:40 she woke Amy. "I need to send a signal," she said, "and I need your help building the transmission array." "What frequency?" "All of them." Amy looked at her for a moment. "Okay," she said, and got up. They spent 4 hours rigging the antenna array to broadcast simultaneously across every frequency the asterisk meridian was capable of generating, which was not an elegant solution but was, Mara felt, an appropriately human one, not a refined answer but a loud one, pointed at the sky with everything they had. The message she broadcast was not coded. It was not in any interstellar language or mathematical sequence. It was a data package. Every piece of information humanity had compiled about the Fen-12 pathogen, every agricultural collapse model, every population projection, every image from every famine zone in the last 15 years, every record of every person who had worked on Project Meridian, and every reason they had given when asked why they'd volunteered. And underneath all of that, below the data, 3 hours of audio recordings pulled from the ship's crew archive. People talking to family members through the comm relay, a birthday song sung badly and enthusiastically in the engineering bay, Amy laughing at her own joke, Chen humming something to himself while running samples, Oren reading aloud from a worn copy of a novel he'd carried since before the mission. What they had. What they were trying to keep. She hit transmit. The signal went out on all frequencies. The bioluminescent network in the valley below went dark. Then it came back, all at once, brighter than before, so bright the planet below the asterisk meridian was briefly visible from orbit as a disk of green-white light. The sphere in the cargo hold, still sealed behind 6 inches of glass at 2.1 Kelvin, pulsed. Not blue-white this time. Gold. Chen came to find her 20 minutes later. He looked like a man who just heard something enormous and was still working out whether he was afraid of it or grateful. "It's opening the door," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means the planet is ours." He shook his head slowly. "Not a gift, not a grant, more like recognition. It decided we're what it was waiting for." Mara sat down on the corridor floor because her legs had made that decision independently. Because of the data package. Because of the recordings, Chen said. Oren reading his book, Amy laughing, all of it. He sat down beside her. "It's been running this test for a very long time, looking for something specific. Not intelligence it's seen before in this galaxy and been unimpressed. Not strength or technological capability. It wanted to know if the species that found the sphere was the kind of species that sings at birthdays." Mara laughed. It came out a little shaky. "That's the test. That's the test. We crossed the dark with a thing we didn't understand," she said, half to herself. "Because we were desperate enough and stubborn enough and scared enough, and we still packed birthday songs." "Yeah," Chen said. "Apparently that's it, that's the whole thing." They sat together in the corridor for a while. Below them, the planet breathed its green-white light. Somewhere in the ship, someone was already awake in the galley, running the coffee maker. She could smell it. And through the hull she could hear the faint structural sounds of 11 human beings living inside a metal vessel in the dark between stars, the creaks and hums and small mechanical voices of a species in the habit of making noise wherever it goes. She thought about the meadow. The impossible, earth-green meadow that something older than civilization had grown for them as a question, or perhaps as a welcome, or perhaps as both, because perhaps to something that old those were the same gesture. She thought about 40 years, maybe 60, and the math that didn't work. She thought about 9 billion people who had no idea this was happening, but were, at this moment, alive. She got up off the floor. "All right," she said, "we have a lot of work to do." She meant it the way scientists mean it when they say it, not as a complaint, not as a burden, but as a declaration of intent, the particular human way of saying, "I am not done yet. I am nowhere near done. Hand me the instruments and clear the table and let's get started." The asterisk meridian began its survey within the hour. Below, the planet waited with infinite patience, and the roots of earth-green grass moved in a wind that smelled of rain about to arrive, and the sphere in the hold sat golden and warm and no longer heavy with secrets. Just a seed that had finally, across unimaginable distances and unimaginable patience and one particularly stubborn species, found the place it was always meant to grow.